to Philosophy Fools, a bi-weekly podcast where a young father and old bachelor talk about life, philosophy, and staying curious. After we catch up on what's triggered our curiosity since our last podcast, Josh and Uncle Greg discuss 4 ideas from Epictetus's Manual for Living, and let you know if it's worth the read. Finally, we'll wrap up with Josh's Dad Corner and Uncle Greg's Thought of the Week. Hope that sounds good, because that's what we're doing. Hey, Josh.
Good morning, Uncle Greg. How's it going?
Everything's going great here. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's just jump in this week to our regularly scheduled opening segment of the curiosity trigger. So basically anything that may have triggered curiosity in your life in this past week.
All right. Well, it's been a fun couple weeks. I guess when we last talked, I just got off of 2 weeks hanging out with kids at home, so they're back in school. And so I've kind of gotten back to normal life. One thing that happened in the past week is I had a birthday. So
and a happy birthday.
Thank you. So I turned 35, and at this point in my life, I try and take, like, the milestone birthdays are 30, 35, 40, like everything else in between doesn't really matter too much anymore. So when I turned 35 a couple of days ago, I started thinking about it, and the more I thought about it, it just started hitting me that, you know, I'm getting older, and then I became curious about quite a lot of things. You know, what is getting older, what is growing up, and I started thinking about my life a little bit. And I know this is a Stoic practice to go through, like, say, your day or anything like that. So I was just going through my life and taking account, you know, everything I've done and what I thought I wanted to do and what I want to do in the future. And I thought it was a really good practice because I felt really good afterwards. And I also, it kind of gave me some goals also. And so just kind of taking in account my life, what was kind of important. And so one of the questions that I mentioned earlier was like, what is getting older? And so I thought about that, because for me, like, I really focus on not acting like an adult. And then I realized, like, what even is that definition? Like, what is an adult? And so that's just what I started thinking about. Like, so little things like I like to watch cartoons, like I like to watch Star Wars cartoons, and I like to be goofy, like, constantly. Like, if I'm not in a work setting, I like to just, you know, mess around with the kids and jump around, and I always want to be active and play sports and stuff. So, you know, I'm just trying to think of, like, what is getting older to me, and I didn't really come up with, like, a good answer to that, except for, like, age is just a number and maybe that shouldn't matter to me. So I thought that was kind of a cool practice. And then and the same as getting older, like, what is growing up? Like we talked about in previous episodes, like that there comes a point in your life where you take control of your life, and that is, quote unquote, growing up or getting older, you know, however we want to talk about it. And that's true in a sense that, like, I own my life, and it's my life, and I guess you could say I'm a quote unquote adult, but, you know, I still like to just mess around and be goofy and have fun all the time. And so, but what I'm getting at here is that thinking about all these things made me realize that I've done a lot in life, and that I've also taken in account, like, all my mistakes and my mess ups in life, and I'm always trying to improve, and that's a big part of my life right now, is just trying to figure out how to get better. And so once I started to really look at my life as a whole, it just started making me feel good that I've accomplished a lot, even though when I think about it on a day-to-day basis, like, I'm like, I'm not doing anything these couple of weeks. But when I look at life as a whole, you know, I felt good, and I felt gracious for the world and the life that I was given. And so I thought that might be a good practice for me to do on a more regular basis than just my milestone birthdays.
Mhm.
And you know, that's just something that was kind of getting me curious.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because it's sort of related to what we talked about creating lifelong goals, and that they are not. I think people tend to look at that as being like an activity of I don't know, like making a bunch of checklists, but the real point behind it is to have a model or have a vision of what you want life to be, so that at any given moment you can be saying to yourself, oh, well, I'm living that life, or I'm not living that life. So I think that having the realization you had was a good one. And you're absolutely right that having those moments of reflection are really important. One thing you brought up that I think is really important to keep clear in your melon is this idea of like not age, not old, but mature. That there are like what we talked about in our episode discussing self-parenting or self-adoption is just the simple idea of being able to take that full responsibility for your life, and that is all the things that keep you out of jail, that keep you in a house, that keep like food in your children's mouths. Those aren't characteristics of behavior, because like watching a cartoon, who cares? But it's this idea of always being evicted, or never having having your electricity turned off every couple of months because you forgot to pay the bills. That's a lack of maturity, not a lack of age. And so I think that being able to sit back and kind of go like, you aren't really getting older, you're just becoming more mature. And frankly, as I think we've also talked about before, there's a lot of people that are like 50 years old who might as well be 20 in terms of their maturity. That the calendar flipping over doesn't change you, only you change you.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so you know, I think that just thinking about the life was important for me. And then it also you know, is just kind of creating what I want to do next. So I really like the practice, and I think it's something that I'm gonna start doing more. I know I've said I do reflect on a day-to-day basis on my day, but just putting life in a bigger perspective definitely helped a lot. I think. So anything interesting happened to you over the past couple weeks?
Well, I did begin to work again
Oh
after
no.
after a 2 year hiatus, or actually I like to refer them as sabbaticals because they are planned absences from day-to-day work. And the one thing that it really, like, God knows there's a million things that occurred that where I was just like, oh my God, I've got to do this and I got to do that. My awareness of my day became a million times more acute than it's been for many months, because I could just wake up and do pretty much whatever I wanted to do, or in the reverse, I could pretty much get up and do nothing. So now I've got this external stimulus to make me think about like my moment to moment life. And what that really got me thinking on was this idea of positive habits versus being in a rut, and that from the outside they can look pretty much the same. I'm a huge advocate for people having positive habits so that they don't have to think consciously about doing a thing. Like a good example is, you were talking about maturity. It's a good positive habit to have a plan for paying your bills. That way you don't have to think about it. It doesn't create any new emotional energy out of you. That you're taking care of business, and that's a good positive habit. But in day-to-day life, a good example for me is going to the gym. Going to the gym is a positive habit. Going to the gym and being sort of unengaged in it and not having goals around my fitness can just be a rut. And it's a lot better than doing nothing. There's no question about that. But the distinction between sort of going through the motions and being hyper engaged, again, from the outside, who would know the difference? But from the inside, I can really get that sense when I walk out of the gym for the fourth day in a row and just say to myself, like, nah, like that was nothing. That was not very, stimulating. So in the beginning, establishing the positive habit of going to the gym, very positive. But if I allow it to drift into becoming just a rut, a thing I do over and over and over again, without any kind of mental engagement, that's a negative. So that was my curiosity stimulus for the week.
So I guess is that why it's important, because for some people, like just say, let's just take the gym example. It's just their goal is literally just to get to the gym in a day or 4 days in a week or whatever their goal is, right? So that it's good to have that goal. And maybe your goal, maybe for 6 months or a year, that's your only goal and that keeps you motivated. Now, are you saying like after that year when you're just kind of going through the motions and going to the gym, and you maybe you start feeling like disconnected or disengaged with just going to the gym, then do you have to change your goals, I guess, in the sense of the gym? Like, would you have to change, like, well, I'm doing this and this now to kind of keep yourself motivated? Because I think the gym is a great example, because there are so many people that just get super motivated for like 3 or 6 months, and then they start falling off. And
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, there's always different reasons why people start falling off of things, and maybe this getting into a rut and just losing being engaged with it because their goals aren't new, maybe. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that when we were talking when we were discussing Seneca, we were talking about the idea of valuing time, valuing like how you spend time, and it's that awareness of realizing that, oh, sure, I mean, believe me, I mean, there's nothing bad about going to the gym 6 days a week. I am happy that I do that, but I'm also hyper aware that the value that I derive back from that is 100% derived from having goals. And I really don't have them right now because they're hard. It's hard to have goals. You have to sit there and say, well, for aerobic training, you have to sort of set your like lower heart rate or something. You have to start to put numbers to it. And the other part is just getting myself motivated to do some kind of resistance training for some point. Again, it's good to do resistance training, but as you and I both know, is that you can look at having worked in gyms before. We've seen people over a period of years be in the gym all the time, but have no basic results.
Right.
And it's because our bodies are adaptive. Our bodies are continuously saying, oh, well, this is new and this is hard. Let me respond to that stimulus. And then after a while, it's like, oh, wait, no, this is no big deal. We do this all the time. And so the reaction to it drops. My point simply being that that's the distinction between a rut and a positive habit. A rut is one thing when you just keep doing something and you almost forget why you're doing it. And it can be something negative too. It can be like, I come home from work and I turn on the TV and I just zone out until I go to sleep. And that's just not, and you can get into that rut and never know that it's a rut. You never realize that you've created a negative habit. And so,
Right. Very true.
yeah, so for me, that's really just the thing that it sparked in my mind was that idea of there's a lot of things I do which are from the outside look good, but from the inside can really be changed into something dynamic and sort of energy creating by being things that I put some kind of goal to. And that just sort of switching it back from a rut back into a positive habit.
All right. That sounds good. Just always change the stimulus.
Sweet. Okay. Wow. So that's our curiosity triggers for the week. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to be talking about Epictetus's Manual for Living. And I'm looking forward to that discussion. So I'll talk to you in a minute.
Sounds good.
And we're back. This week, we're going to switch things up a little bit. I didn't get a chance to read the book, Epictetus's Manual for Living, but Josh did. And he's chosen 4 of his top ideas and the things that they made that triggered thoughts inside of it. So I'm going to have Josh lead this discussion this week, and I'll just chime in with whatever comes to mind. And so, Josh, how did you come to even look at a Manual for Living?
Well, so it's an interesting story. I really do like this book. So I actually first got this book through a friend. They let us borrow, my wife and I borrow this book, and they said, this is a really good basic philosophy book. to kind of look through. And so I started reading through it and I really liked it. And so I actually got myself a copy for myself. And I really started getting into it. What I really like about the Manual for a Living, so just a little background on it. I don't want to get too deep into like history or anything like that, but basically Epictetus, he had a school and he would only give a bunch of lectures. So he actually never came out with his own book, or so the history says.
Hmm.
One of his pupils basically recorded all of his lectures into these 8 books. And then those 8 books were put down into something called the discourses,
Hmm.
and that was like his published work of all of his lectures.
Okay.
This Manual for Living is just a summary essentially of all the discourses.
Hmm.
And so it's set up really cool. It just sets up the topic and then a quick, maybe 10 sentences about that topic.
Hmm.
So it's really good for beginners of philosophy and just being able to kind of put down and pick up the book at any time, read something, and then put that into practice. So just as a simple beginner's philosophy tool, I
Uh-huh.
really like this book, just on a day-to-day basis to keep around. And you can open it and just read for 2 minutes basically and get some good knowledge from it. So that's what I really like and kind of the background of the book. And so
I'm sorry.
now, go
I don't
ahead.
mean it. I don't mean to interrupt, but one thing that jumped out at me that was really interesting was that Epictetus was enslaved until he was 18 or 19 years old. And so when we think about the things that come down from Epictetus and everybody else from that time period, it's really important for us to remember how hard their lives were and that these philosophies weren't coming from somebody eating Cheetos on a couch playing World of Warcraft. These people were living a hard life, and so it really puts everything into a good context. But sorry, I didn't mean to digress like that. But I really think it's important for people to remember that this isn't just highfalutin thinking. This is coming from people living rough lives.
I think that is important though. I mean, because they did live in the trenches, but a lot of that stuff is directly related to. I mean, a lot of this can be directly related to our lives.
Yes.
So as much as the world has changed over the 2000, and we've talked about this before, as much as the world has changed over the past couple of thousand years, I mean, almost all these tools are great for now. And I mean, I haven't lived, I would say, a hard life or anything like that, but I can still implement a lot of these into my life. So I definitely think that's a good point. All right, so let's get into my ideas from the Manual for Living.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a really easy to just go through the book and find different pieces that you like. This is actually the first excerpt from the book is controlling what you can control and knowing what you can or cannot control. And so the basically what that meant or what he was saying is that there are certain things in life that we can control and there are certain things in life that we can't control and that we have to figure out what those are and then proceed accordingly. So one of the big things that he was talking about is that you can control your internal self and how you react, but you can't control how other people react or how other people view us or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how often in life, are you say at work or something like that, and you say put a project out to the ether and everyone sees it, and you're really worried about how other people what other people think about it and how they're going to react. So that is something that is actually not in your control. Your only control is how you react to their reaction, or at least that's how I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of got me curious and just started thinking about my life and different interactions and just making sure that if it is something I can control, then well, I need to take control of it and take
Mm-hmm.
control of the situation and make sure that I can. But if it's something that I can't control, first off, real like because I might have a reaction to something that I can't control. but that's normal. So I just need to realize that and be mindful of it, and then make sure that I don't react in a poor way to somebody else. And then so in the future that I don't do the same thing essentially. And so that was the first idea. What do you think about that one?
I think that what you're saying is a really good insight. One of the parts of this, this concept is something that's a real big part of success thinking in general, and the reason being is that it's an energy consumption versus conservation kind of idea, which is that when you experience stress, anxiety, fear, that there's always in that moment, there's some component you control and there's some component you don't control. And our ability to separate those things is a skill. It's not inborn. You actually have to set that as a goal for yourself of being like, you know what? I'm going to be good at not worrying about what I don't control and controlling what I do control. And in the example that you gave of like the workplace situation, particularly if you've got to deliver something to somebody who's important, that management process doesn't happen from the moment you deliver to after. It's from the minute you begin to create the thing, that you need to be understanding that you cannot fully control the response to it, but you can absolutely control whether or not the thing that you're giving out is your absolute best work. Because there's a reading of this that could go like, whatever, man, whatever people just react to, whatever. And it's just not the way life is that you need to be ready to defend the things you do against this unknown reaction from other people. So actually stepping back and realizing that in the great context of life, all of the things that create stress, anxiety, and fear inside of us have those two components. They have the I control it, I don't control it component. And it's vital for you, the person, to always get into the level of the things you control. And all I mean by that is that, doing a half-ass job is going to get you half-ass results.
So it's almost like a paradox. I mean, like, well, it is a paradox, I think, right? So let's just do the same business example. So if you're turning in a project, I mean, you care, right? You do care what they think about. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to care what they think about, or do you? I mean, I guess that's the question, right? Right. So all you can really control though is what you bring to the table. So that forces you to work in a manner that that no matter what you do, you did your best work, and you do want them to react well to your project. I mean, you want the project to be successful. So it is a paradox. I mean, you can't, if they react poorly, I mean, what happens if they react negatively to your project? I mean, you're going to feel that. And so, but I guess that's what his point here is that you just kind of you kind of have to like say, if they do react negatively, you have to take that into account, but you can't let that control you. You would just have to, I guess, go back to your project and retool it. I mean, so what would you do in that sense? Because if they do react negatively and you do take what they're talking about, I mean, you'll just walk away and be like, I don't care. Or like, how would you react to that?
Well, that leads to unemployment. But I think that the part that we have to make sure that we're talking about is that life isn't an abstract chunk of beginnings, middles, and ends that you can just walk away from it. So in the business in the business example we're using, you create a project, you deliver a project, and it's reacted to negatively. It doesn't end there. You have to then kind of go like, oh, so what are the next things I control? So is it, let me go back and, because your goal when you were creating the project was that it be successful and it be accepted well. If it doesn't happen, then you sort of move again onto the things that you do control, which is your relationships with those people, your follow-up to their reactions. It's all of those things that are things that you absolutely control. It's trying not to lose the emotional energy of sitting around thinking about what these people are thinking. because that's where you get killed, is that continuous state of sort of hamster wheel anxiety that comes from being worried about things that you don't control. So it's really, I guess it's really that word worry or anxiety that should be the trigger. Because when you're experiencing that, I think the Buddhist, they define the suffering as trying to control the uncontrollable. And worry is the thing, it's the trigger for you to know that you're concerned about something you don't control. And right at that moment is when you sit down and go, okay, wait, what do I control about this problem? What don't I control about this problem? And then attack the thing you control, because that's when the worry goes away, because you realize that you're doing everything that you can to do the things that you control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good explanation for that, and it really makes sense. I think that like if I can't control a situation, then I mean, so basically, bottom line is if I can't control that situation, I just have to almost emotionally, like I just have to make sure that whatever they're thinking is not hurting me at that point. Like I just have to take, like, so how am I going to do it next? How am I going to do it next? I mean, okay, that makes good sense. I like that.
And this just flash into my head. The thing to realize is that if you're involved in something, there's some part you control. So there's always, like, the fact that it's happening to you or that you're engaged in it means that there's some component you control, even if it just goes down to controlling your reactions to something. So it's that, and I think that that's where Epictetus and all of the Stoics are going, is sort of having this awareness of the self in relationship to life. And so that's, and that self should always be concerned about controlling what you control and not controlling what you don't control. And so that's just and that becomes, that just isn't natural. Like our brains want to assume that we have a lot more control or a lot less control than we actually have. And we have to train ourselves to learn what things we control and what we don't control, because eventually it becomes more habitual. But I mean, I would throw that out as a challenge to you and to anybody else, to take 1 week just to say, I'm going to go from Sunday to Saturday. And anytime that I feel any kind of stress, anxiety, and fear, I'm going to take that moment to think about what I control and what I don't control, just to see how weird it is. Because when you really sit down and think about it, that's when you start to see how bananas your psychology is. Like, we really do just think things like, well, how come they should like me because I'm a good person? And that word should is a suffering word. It should means that you are living in a psychological state where you are controlling what you don't control.
Yeah, and this, what I thought about from what you just said there is like social media. Like so many people will just like post something to just thinking in their mind like, oh, how is this person going to react? How is this person going to react? Like so that's like just normal in our mind. It's
Yep.
just like, how are other people going to react to us? And but in reality, that's not something we can control. But I feel like a lot of people try and control that, especially on social media, even
Yep.
though so that just gives them frustration and anxiety just from trying to control that all the time.
Exactly. And so that's and so all of these things are really good examples of how hard, as simple as what he's saying is, which is control what you control and don't control what you don't control. That is not a simple, it's a simple observation that requires a really complicated and hard look at yourself to see all of your own sort of weird psychology and your own psychosis of, you and I discussed the idea of when we were in our 20s, how we were like convinced we were super geniuses who had it all figured out. That's just a crazy person talking. And but in reality starts to smack you around a little bit. And if you are not somebody who looks at an idea like this, controlling what you control, you'll never learn, and you'll just continue to be a crazy person for the rest of your life. So
Sounds good. All right, idea one, control what you can control. Let's take the next week and look at what we do and see if we can figure out what we can control and what we can't.
Great.
All
And
right.
what's next?
Number 2 idea is implant in yourself the ideas you ought to cherish. Hold to your true aspirations no matter what is going on. Okay, so I have so this one is kind of like sticking with your values. That's kind of what I thought from this one.
Uh-huh.
And why I think it's important. So I want to start with an example. So, I'm in I'm 35 now. And so
Uh-huh.
over the past 5 or 8 years, I've gone on tons of bachelor parties. And so one thing, we haven't really discussed it is, that I quit drinking 6 years ago. And
Hmm.
so going into bachelor parties, there, it's a kind of a wild situation, like, because
Right.
it's a big party situation. There's things that are expected of you and whatnot. So I was with my best friends. We were down in Florida, and and of people wanted to do bachelor party type things,
Yeah.
right? And for me, and I don't want to sit here and like say, well, I didn't do it. Well, I created values when I stopped drinking, and I wanted to stick with those values, going forward. And drinking wasn't really a big part of it. So what happened was, all like, there was 15 of us, and 14 of them, except for me, went out to the party or whatever. And to me, for my values, uh I didn't want to do it, right? So
Right.
I had to hold true, and that was an extremely hard thing to do in front of 14 of my friends who were, I'm best friends with. And so they all went out to do that, and I stayed back. And so that was just like one of the main thing, and that was so hard for me. and
Yeah.
and it creates separation too, in friendships and in relationships. But what it's got me thinking about is, like, does anyone else have a value system? Like, do people even think of, like, what their values actually are? Do
Mhm.
I know what my values actually are? Should I write out like a value system or something like that? And so that's what I kind of created when I quit drinking, was a value system, and I stuck to that. And at the end of the day, I felt good about it, and I still feel good about it.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what I started thinking about, like, should I write out like a value system for my family, like how people have done in the past, like their coat of arms, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of what I started thinking about from that.
It's not a bad idea, and meaning that I really do think that having there's a tricky gap between personal values and trying to like apply them to other people, and this goes back to controlling what you control and not controlling what you don't control. And so it would be an awesome world if everybody had a value system, because that would mean people have some kind of self-awareness of how their actions impact other people. And so in the context of your own family, I think that that's a great idea and something really simple. I think most people choose religion or dogma to be that's what they choose for their personal value. The challenge with that, of course, is that it's from the outside in, that you are looking at some pre-existing set of values and either saying, yes, this is what I'm going to believe, or no, I'm not going to believe that. But more likely, you're raised in a family where that dogma is it's just there. So you think that you chose it. And so for the purposes of really creating a good, strong personal philosophy, I always encourage people who adopt a religious framework to take a moment to sort of reassess their relationship to it, to make sure that they get rid of all the parts that are involuntary, where, I grew up in it, so there it is, and replace it with a real conscious act. So like they choose the dogma as opposed to it just being a part of their heads. And in the same way with what you're talking about, writing down your own list of values, and particularly sort of putting them in a priority. It's not going to be anything crazy, because if it's super complicated, it'll never work. But if you really look at things, like, I've always thought that treating others like you would desire to be treated it's a great value, because it always puts you in, it removes everything. If you take that one value, take it as it's written, it removes all hatred. It removes all sort of nationalistic mythologies about other people. It removes racism. It removes intolerance. If everyone truly treated others as they would have themselves treated. And so having things like simple value statements like that for yourself and for your family really does make a difference. And I'm a huge fan of just making sure that you take care of your own business, meaning that don't rely on others to supply to you. And again, this is not a statement towards people who are extraordinarily disadvantaged to begin with, because part of life is accepting help when you need help. And that, I think, is, it's tough for people's egos. But at the same time, if they're thinking to themselves, I'm trying to work myself to a place where I don't need to accept outside help in order to take care of my own business. But that imagine a world where you are a person who is in a position to take care of your own business, and that you don't owe people money, and that you aren't continuously looking to others to supply transportation to you or whatever. That essentially you're always looking at yourself as a person who, it relies on themselves for their basics. And then that's, in general, what you said at the very beginning is very true, which is most people don't even have a notional value system. Even if they possess religion, they never really chose the religion. It's just there.
Yeah, and do value systems basically go out the window when you're like, a lot of times when maybe you have a value system, but when you're with a group of people, I mean, that's a new stimulus that you have to worry about. Like people saying, "Oh, just come on, do this," like peer pressure and whatnot. I mean, as a teenager, even if I had a value or whatever, like somebody else telling me, it's really easy to get caught up with your friends, and so.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that is definitely something that you kind of learn as you get older is if you want to create a value system, then like, I think it's important to stick with your values. I mean, like for a while, I didn't have a value system, but I had values,
Yeah.
but they would easily change. Like
Right.
if
So,
one of
you
my
would
friends was
feel
like,
bad if you betrayed them,
now,
or even then.
yeah, well, kinda. I mean,
Because,
sure.
well, and I'm driving to a very specific point, which is, it's not a value system if it's subject to change.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So
it's
if
a
I wanted to
notion.
give like if I wanted to give like my kids a value system, or not give them, like, should they should be the ones that kind of create it, right?
I would say that, bottom line is until you're like, what, 22, I can't remember what the science says, but essentially your brain is just you're a dysfunctional animal until you're like 22 or 23. So as a parent, at a certain level, it's up to you to even supply idea, like, and particularly things that are not controversial. I really do think that, like, the golden rule, treating others as you treat yourself, is a non-controversial idea, and that as a parent, you shouldn't feel bad about supplying something like that to your children. How they act on it later in life, it's a different story. But when they're being raised, the world isn't going to give people values. That's
Right.
radicalization is where, like, and that's the reason radicalization is a problem, is that people who are empty vessels, who don't really possess, who are at a loss for what their value systems could be, are easy victims, or essentially easy targets for people who want to walk in the door and say, like, here is a set of permanent values that are absolutely true, and if you believe them and follow me, your life is set. That is a radicalization process, and it's extremely attractive, because I do think a lot of parents in the modern context, because I mean, I don't know, like when I was younger, it was a lot more, I think, common for parents to be much more authoritative, like authoritarian in how they raise people. And when I see a person who's 23 years old and really doesn't have a sense of self or a sense of values, that's a parenting problem at a certain level. I'm not here to put blame on people, but somebody's got to stick something into the kid's brain for them to either accept or reject. They have to get into a universe where they're being presented with ideas such as personal responsibility, personal values, because the world's not going to give it to them. And I think a lot of people think that they're being mean or they're being overbearing by introducing ideas like that. And frankly, a lot of them are, because their ideas are terrible, and the ideas that they want to instill in the children are horrible ideas. But at least they're taking the responsibility of putting the ideas there.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so one thing that we didn't get into is holding true to your aspirations.
Yeah.
Once you make your values or your aspirations or whatever, and you want to go towards it, I mean, so what you have to be able to change that and everything too. So this goes back to like all of our talks that we've had. It's just like determining when to change our values and basically creating your value hierarchy, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And then you would just have to kind of change that as it goes. And then if you get older, you might have to change it a little bit more than when you get younger, right?
Yeah, except for I don't think that the values, and this is a technical point, but it's important. The values themselves should never change. If they are useful values, they never leave, because the idea itself is, again, at a macro enough level, and so that treating others as you would treat yourself it's your value. But you also realize that in a given moment, if there's a home invasion and your family is being threatened by somebody for no good reason at all, there is nothing, you aren't really rejecting that value to protect yourself. It's just in that moment, you are saying, look, you're forcing me to react to an unacceptable situation. And so I am going to react as you, and at a certain level, you are still treating them as they would treat you, because they're attacking you. So attacking them back, it is not contradictory to your value. But I guess my point is that I think you're driving towards the idea of like peer pressure sort of knocking people off of their game, essentially. And that's when you know it isn't of value. And I just to be super simple and clear about this, a value is a decision, and decisions are permanent things that you may get less interested in later, but you aren't necessarily changing the value. And so, like I said, like we had talked about, let's say you had a value of trying to increase your income for the protection of your family over time, and that you could easily get to a place, because your children move out, and they are no longer part of your day-to-day financial responsibility, where all of that intensity, that value of trying to provide more material safety for your family, it no longer is that meaningful. You may still want to be a person who achieves greatly, or a person who at minimum is taking care of their own business, but the value stays the same, but your hierarchy of day-to-day actions shifts.
Okay. I like it. We might get into a little bit more of this with my idea number 4, but for now,
Okay.
I think that's good with idea number 2. So let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be right back with ideas 3 and 4.
Great. See you in a minute. Okay, and we're back. So, Josh, what's your next great idea from Manual for Living?
All right, number 3 is a simple one, but I think it's pretty important. It's just avoid adopting other people's negative views. And I think this is important in our climate today with social media, and then also just in general with your friends or anything like that. So a couple of things I was thinking about with this is so just with my friend group. All right. if you have a group of, say, five close friends, is that what they say, that like your five closest friends are kind of who you become in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because you spend time with them and you just kind of adopt their ideas and whatnot. So you can easily adopt another person's negative views by just being around them all the time and listening to them.
Yeah.
You can also not, if you think about idea one, what you control and what you don't control. But I think it's just easy for people to listen to their friend, and whether they want to call it venting or whatever, or just talking negative about the world. I mean, if you listen to that day in and day out, I mean, it's, you have to make a conscious choice to not adopt their negative views,
Mm-hmm.
or you can easily just start feeling negative about it. Whether that, like, if you hear something about it on TV or anything like that, and you just automatically go to that negative mindset because your friends have been talking about it all the time. I
Yeah.
think that is super common, but it has to be something that you consciously avoid.
Mm-hmm. There was a
And then,
oh, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, one of the things that has come up in my life was a reframing of this as the notion that we as people have kind of like an emotional ecosystem that we live in, and that our emotional states are kind of like water, and that things like negative thinking is like pollution in the water, which is, it tends to spread everywhere. It's very difficult to have it to isolate it and push it out. So even if we really, really consciously like, oh, I'm not going to let that negative thing get inside of me, like almost the very act of saying I'm not going to let that negative thing get inside of me creates a situation where it's there. And so the point being is that, like an environment, it's kind of on us to police our environment, so that when because we do have friends who are just like negative Nellies, that's their thing, is to be the person who's just always complaining about one thing or another. And I had gotten to places in my life where I had to just have that conversation with them and kind of go, look, I'm happy to help you, achieve, to make positive change in your life, to achieve a goal, to do something. But what I can't do is I can't sit around and just listen to you bitch all the time. It just bums me out. And I've lost a couple of friends because I was straight up with them about that. But then I had to ask the question of, like, what's a friend? Like, what is if the price of friendship is for somebody to continuously bring their negative energy to the table, particularly if I offer to help them transition to things that they consider to be things they want out of their lives. Because I know that for a fact, that if a person says, you know what, I'm just really sad because I'm poor, or I'm really sad because my physical self is in bad shape. Like, all of these things are things that can be converted into positive action, but more people than not are really just addicted to the negative headspace. And so there comes a moment when you just have to say, like, look, man, like, I'm all for, let's talk it out. Let's see if there's a way that we can, salvage this relationship so that it's good for both of us. But if all you're doing is transferring your anxiety into me because you feel momentarily better when you vent, but what you've done is you've given it to me. That's the reason you feel better. And that's not a positive exchange.
That's interesting what you say about friends. Like I feel like when you go from like high school friends to college friends to post college friends, like what you're saying, I think the big difference is the people who have adopted a growth mindset against the people who haven't adopted a growth mindset.
Uh-huh.
Because I mean, anyone can be negative. I mean, if you're not aware of your negativity or negative views or anything like that, it's pretty easy to just be like kind of bum yourself out or bum somebody else out about it.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you haven't adopted that growth mindset of like every negative can, you can learn stuff from any negative, or you can change that negative into different energy, and whether or not that negative might still be a negative thing, but your energy can produce like positivity or a new idea or really anything from that. So I think changing that mindset from just adopting a growth mindset here would be a big thing, and not adopting other people's negative views. And that's just with friends. I mean, we haven't even gotten into social media yet, which social media is just, I mean, we don't need to get into it too deep, but that's like the ultimate avoid adopting their negative views,
Yeah.
because it's everywhere on social media compared to just your five closest friends. I mean, and the problem with I mean, we don't need to get into all this, but the problem with the algorithms, the problem how Facebook and Instagram and everything works is that everything you do, they're only going to give you more of it. And so
Yeah.
if you're into negative things, then you're all of a sudden going to have a million people with that same negative thought, like saying, oh, that is awesome, or like, oh, I'm sad just with you, and so now you kind of feel you feel good because other people are being negative around you, but
Right.
that's something that even 20 or 30 years ago we didn't get, but now it's just everywhere with social media. It's kind of a mess.
And what you said earlier about Epictetus bringing up this idea of controlling what you control, and this idea of having a value system. If you don't have a value system, you're easily overwhelmed by the just the idea of being part of the group, and sort of if there's no reason not to just join in with the group, that's where you're going to go. So it's easy to go along with the flow. And if it so happens that people are saying that, yeah, your politicians eat babies, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. They're eating babies. And all of a sudden you got a bunch of friends, quote unquote friends, and it's an interesting point that, as you know, for a number of years, I ran a meetup group based on a seminar I put together called Fundamental Success, which was just an idea of getting before you even get into something like, I want to sell real estate, or I want to work out, that there are parts of a success process that are agnostic to the specific thing you want to do. They're just habits you need to get into in order to tackle doing something specific. And part of that was, it turned out that a number of people, these were all people between their mid-30s to their mid-40s, who were very concerned that they'd lost a lot of friends, and they really wanted to make more friends. And that led to a very interesting conversation about, like, what is a friend? There's a huge, if what you want is a person who is perfectly aligned with you from an intellectual perspective, and also wants to do all the fun things like play golf that you want to do, then your ability to find that person shrinks a lot, because you're asking for for the friend to take up a lot of space. Whereas, like, say, if you're a person who, let's say you're a drinking person, and on Friday nights you like to go to a bar and hang out, you just need people at that point. You don't really, meaning that, like, your benchmark for what makes a good friend is just somebody who's going to show up and engage. And then you don't really need to talk to them till the next time you go out. And then there's the whole other level of a friend who's a real soulmate to you, somebody who you can really share your deepest thoughts and ideas with. And that person may not be the person that you want to go bowling with. But I think that in our heads, because most of our friendships are formed in youth, where, frankly, it's just, are you physically available to go play basketball?
Yeah. Are you in my class?
Yeah, that they turn into your friends. And that's great, because that's how we learn to socialize with people. That's how we learn to, just get to know other people and to get along with people. But as you move forward, and your example of not drinking is a good one. Like, I stopped drinking when I was about your age, when I was about 35. And it wasn't about drinking, like, meaning, like, I didn't have a thing in my head saying, like, I got to stop being a person who consumes alcohol. It just started to hurt me really bad, where I would just take in like 2 beers, and I would wake up the next day and go, oh my God, I've lost this entire day, because I just felt fogged up completely. And in my head, that just wasn't a good enough trade-off anymore. But that's when I started to notice that a lot of my quote friends became further and further distance from me because I was no longer available to be a person who would go out and, occupy the space of the person at the bar who was, yucking it up with you. So, I think that under all of this idea of avoiding other people's negative views does very much go back to your original notion of setting a value system, because it can be very hard as you grow older to realize that some of the people who are your friends, quote unquote, when you look at it in the cold light of day of kind of going like, well, why is this person in my life? All they do is bring negative vibes to me. There's never a moment when I get energy back from this person. This person's always dumping their negative energy into me, that you have to kind of step back and go like, hey man, this isn't working out.
Yeah, making friends as you get older is definitely harder. And what you just said, I'm definitely going to start thinking about that more often. I have speaking of bachelor parties, I have another bachelor party to go to this weekend or next weekend. So maybe I'll kind of think about our conversation while I'm there, because it's been a while. It's been almost 2 years since I've seen a lot of my friends because of COVID and everything. So
yeah. And just being able to engage people. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you there, but but just this idea of engaging people at the level of like, what are the things? Because with other people, we're always engaged in a transaction. And that transaction is an emotional transaction. It's a time commitment transaction. And being able to, I'm very curious about what's going on with people. And that's why I love our talks together, because I get to know what you're thinking about. I'm a type of person who's not very interested in sort of what people are doing, like a recitation of, we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. And that's just not a type of exchange that I'm interested in. I'm much more curious about what did they think about what they did, not just telling me what they did.
Perfect. I like it. All right. Number 3 is avoid adopting other people's negative views. Let's go on to number 4. Number 4 is, all right, so this one, it might have some similarities with number 1, but I feel like a lot of this stoicism has similarities to basically every other thing we talk about.
Yeah.
So this is clearly define the person you want to be. And okay, so we can talk about values and everything, which I know is important with this. We can go back to Seneca. Seneca talked about purpose. Like it is clearly defining the person you want to be, creating your purpose and creating your values, and then going forward. So the reason I want to talk about this is that it sometimes bugs me because of the reason. So for me, clearly define the person you want to be. Now, I can do that in a sense of like maybe values, like we've already talked about. I can clearly define my values. But what he kind of gets into in the excerpts after this is figuring out like what you want to be in life and what you want to do in life. And this has always bugged me because I want to do everything. Okay, he talks about dabblers too, and we've talked about that a little bit. Okay, so you go into something and you do it for 6 months and you don't like it and you go on to the next thing, right? So he talks about like looking into the next 6 months. Like say you choose to do something, you take on a new business opportunity or something like that. Look at your life for the next 6 months. Like, are you gonna like each aspect of it? Like envision your day to day, envision going to the office, envision working with people in the office, really figure out if that's what you want to do before you do it. Right. And that's what he says. And that's fine. And I get it. And I'm sure you can give me some insight into it, but it also bugs me because for me, I like to try stuff and I like to try everything. And I would rather have 20 different jobs in 20 years and then have 2 jobs in 20 years, like something like that, because I want to try new things. I want to have more opportunities. I want to get more experiences. But I do also understand what he's trying to say is like, don't be a dabbler. Like if I try a new job or something like that, I'm going to jump into it full force and really try on it. But I want to have when I'm 70, when I'm 80 years old, I want to say that I've done 50 different things. I don't want to just say I was a welder my whole entire career, like, and that's just a personal thing. And I don't know if that's necessarily good. But that's just why clearly defining the person you want to be is hard for me to kind of wrap my head around. And I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that and
Yeah.
and see what you think about it.
I think that what might be causing some like a little bit of churn in your engagement with this idea is separating the person idea from the purpose idea, because the person has the purpose. The purpose doesn't create the person. And so all I mean by that is that if you are a person, if you decide that you are a person who treats others as he would be treated, who takes care of his own business, who is curious about new things, who always gives his best, who doesn't like turn his back on his family and friends, like those are characteristics of the person. And that person can then choose a purpose. And the dabblers thing is it's real, and it is annoying, because as a person myself who has devoted myself to certain things, like I get very with my visual art, I really was trying to re-engage with a part of myself that I trained very seriously for a number of years. It actually resulted in a career, and that all of that was something that I gave my all to, because I'm a person who, when I have a purpose, will engage with it fully. And I'm also a person who has an awareness when I'm not doing that. Meaning that doesn't mean that things that I've chosen to do, I always gave 100% to. It was the fact that I wasn't giving it 100% that I needed to listen to, because as a person, it was going against my own value. So that from what you're talking about is that I believe that when Epictetus is talking about the idea of defining the person you want to be, is that you're an organism, you're a self, you're an individual who has certain attitudes, who has certain values, and has certain behaviors. And then things like your purpose are the things that you choose, is that you as the individual that you've defined choose to do. And you'll know inside of yourself whether or not you're pursuing something that is of value to you because of how you as a person react to it. That the thing you've chosen to do, like say, like we had talked about that idea of like wanting to be the greatest golfer in the world, that is a person who will sacrifice everything to be the best at something. There's a lot of people who that's just not them. They are not people who are capable of sacrificing everything to be the best at something. That's the reason that not everybody is a world-class athlete, because it's a unique kind of person who can pull that off. But in choosing a purpose, like I said, like you'd know it, is that if you're a person, if you genuinely are a person who will give it your best shot, you'll know if you've chosen something that you're truly giving your best shot, or when you're just not, you just aren't engaged in it. But for whatever reason, like say it's making you enough money or whatever, that you aren't pursuing your highest purpose. But this all goes back to what we talked about in terms of having a value hierarchy, is that different moments in time require different things of us as the person we've chosen to be. And we may have to choose against one thing, like stoking our curiosity, against another thing, which is providing food for our family.
Yeah, it seems like a common theme, like this value hierarchy, and everything that we learned from Seneca and now with Epictetus is like it's just really semi-defining what you want in life and your and like where you want to go and your values in life. And then it just seems like a lot of it is based off of that, and then you can kind of change as you go. And that's what it's starting to seem like to me, is just like kind of creating that value hierarchy of things that are important to you, and then just being that person to your best possible degree. I mean, essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's
that's kind of like the theme that I'm seeing.
yeah, and I think a big part of this is the ability to be consistent, and that's where the person is consistent, not the things they do. And so and that's the reason that when we talk about dabblers, somebody who wakes up in the morning and goes, "I'm a poet," and then they wake up 2 days later and go like, "I am a weightlifter." It's that those are just different things altogether, and so it's the fact that that person can't make decisions and can't be consistent that's that's a problem because they don't know themselves, they don't have self-awareness, and so all of a sudden they're just a different person each time they wake up, and that's what causes all this kind of internal strife. And that's the difference between somebody who's trying something and somebody who's dabbling in something, is that the dabbler gets to imagine that they're a person who takes things seriously, whereas somebody who really is trying knows that they are a person that takes things seriously, and that they may get 6 days into something and realize, you know what, this just isn't right because I know who I am. This isn't a thing for me.
So like could a value be like I value experimentation,
Mm-hmm.
like just in general in life, like and experimentation and being curious. I mean, those are things that I really like. I like experimenting, and in everything that I do, I try like in fitness or in my work or in just general things like setting up my day-to-day schedule and how I'm going to fit things in there. Like that's all experimentation, and
Yeah.
I like to adopt experimentation into a lot of parts of my life. And so I think that would be a value for me. So I guess I just I guess I would consider I wouldn't be a dabbler. I just like to try a lot of things. And as long as I'm giving that my full attention, then I guess that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's so. But before we leave this topic, the one point that I want everybody to kind of get clear, and this is the reason I take this so seriously, is it's something that didn't really occur to me until later than it would have been really useful for me, which was that idea of separating the things I do from the person I am, and just having the stronger you can create a picture in your head of who you are, and that the things that that you will never betray, and that things that maybe aren't that important become a thing that can make decisions. And it's the people, and to be clear, when I use the word decision, a decision is a permanent state. It's something that says, I'm going from, for me was a good example, I went from somebody who had debt to somebody who in my head would never be in debt. And it took, from the minute I made that decision, it took 10 years to become the person who was not in debt because I had a lot of debt to get out of. But I made that decision once and I never went back on that decision. But I couldn't have been that person if I was the kind of individual who is wishy-washy in his decision-making process.
Right. You could have just jumped right back into a credit card
Bingo, because I'd done it before. I had
after
gotten
like
out
3
of
weeks
I'd
of being
gotten
debt
out of
free.
debt when I was like 27, and got myself back into debt when I was 20, when I was like 30 years old. So yeah, so it's that ability. There's a I think we've talked about this before, but before we leave this topic, I wish I could remember who created this model, but it's decisions equal life. The more decisions you make, the more alive you feel. The fewer decisions, the more dead you feel. And if you get all the way down to the point of never being able to make a decision in life, you're just a living zombie.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. I like it.
Mm-hmm. So okay, so
Cool.
well, let's do a quick wrap up on this. It sounds very much like reading Manual for Life by Epictetus, or Manual for Living by Epictetus, was a really good experience and something that you'll continue moving forward.
I think it's a great book, and it's just simple, and it's easy to read, and I think everyone should read it for sure.
Okay, great. I'm definitely going to pick that up this week and add that to my arsenal of things that I refer to. Sweet.
All
Okay,
right,
so
cool.
I guess so you're going to take us out.
Let's let's take a break. When we're back, I'll discuss my dad corner for the week, and Uncle Greg will give us his thought of the week.
Great. Talk to you in a minute. And we're back. Josh, what's up in the dad's corner this week?
All right, Dad's Corner this week. Well, something that I think about a lot, and I think I mentioned it before, is that, and it's just a constant reminder for myself, is that do not trust the old saying of do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to children and raising my kids, they will never do what I say, and they will always do what I do. And so just reminding myself of that is very important. Because so let's just put a one example out there is pretty much like we try and do a nightly walk after we eat every night, just like for health, and it's really good family time. Take like a 1.5 mile walk with all the kids, and instead of just sitting there watching TV at the end, like before bedtime at the end of the
Uh-huh.
night. And so after we've been doing that for a long time, and finally our kids are asking to go on the walk instead of watch TV.
Okay.
And to me that's an amazing thing. And that's only because we do it, and it's not because I can tell her on a day-to-day basis that it's healthier to go on a walk. It's good for you, it's good for your heart and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean anything to her. Us doing it and us being good examples is the only thing that I see working on an extended basis for our kid.
And that's a great thing to just take with you into life in general, because that's, being a parent's one thing, but same thing goes for like what we were talking about when you deal with friends who are kind of terrible friends, is that that terrible friend can be a person be like, I am your friend, I stick with you to the end, I got your back, buddy. And then all they do is talk about how shitty their lives are.
It 100% makes you a better person, because you have to realize that everything you do has to be, I don't know, it doesn't have to be, but like you take the stance of you do the moral high, always choose the moral high ground, always choose to go on a walk instead of watch TV. Like you want to be the good example. And as humans, at least in my experience, it's really easy to not be a good example. It's really easy after I stuff my face full of food to sit down in front of the couch and zone out for the last 2 hours of the day. I mean, those are all really easy things, and making that choice it's definitely made me a better person. It's made me a better dad. And I always and I always catch myself like almost making the wrong choice, and then seeing my kids and being like, oh, I got to make the right choice here. So
That
I
is
definitely
great.
like it.
Yeah, and being at a real macro level, being a man of your word, and that would just be like if you're a person who says, it's a good idea to go out after dinner, you've drawn the line in the sand. You're either a liar or you're somebody who tells the truth.
One thing that's so hard with this though is when your kid does something that they're not supposed to, and it's funny, because you have to sit there and you have to try and not crack up laughing or anything like that. And so in my mind, I know what's right and what's wrong, but it's sometimes hard as just as a human to not just laugh at my kid doing stupid things sometimes. But it just makes me think, and it's definitely a learning opportunity every day.
Oh, that's great.
But I mean, that's pretty much it for me on my dad corner. I was pretty busy with work all week, so I was just seeing the kids at night. So do you have our thought of the week for us?
I've got, yes, and this is something that I've carried with me since I picked up on it, which about 10 or 15 years ago was the first time I was exposed to the thinking of Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was somebody who was a concentration camp survivor, neuroscientist, philosopher. He was an extraordinary individual. And this quote has just haunted me ever since I first heard it. And it is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And that notion that we are constantly being stimulated by something, and it is only by taking a moment instead of immediately reacting, instead of saying, you poked me, so I poke you back. That this notion that we have control over how we react to things is hugely important, because I believe that most people believe in a stimulus response environment where they really don't have a control. Is that like, hey, this person did this, so I had to do that. And where Frankl was taking this to its furthest extreme was he was a person who had been, like, all of his external freedoms and his external reality had been removed from him. He was imprisoned. He was imprisoned by people who were out to murder his entire culture. And he knew that. And so his body was really no longer under his control. And he realized in that environment that he still had the power to be the person who chose his response. And so that's something that I really want all people to always be aware of, is that the environment doesn't make you do something, you make you do something, and that you always have the power to choose your response.
That's a great thought for the week. I love it.
Okay, well, looks like that's it for this week, and I guess we're getting together tomorrow for a little birthday celebration for you.
Woo!
Woohoo! It's gonna be good. Okay, well, until next time.
All right, Uncle Greg, have a good one, and we will see you tomorrow.
Sounds great. Take care, pal. Bye-bye. Hey folks, Uncle Greg here. Just wanted to thank you for listening, and be sure to join us next time when we tackle some of life's big ideas. And a special thanks to Ted Onulak and Exit 10 for our music. You can check them out at exit10band.com. That's EXIT10band.com.